finally revealed. BTS's Jin reportedly fainted after completing one overly emotional scene in his first acting debut. But what exactly happens behind the scenes? Is this just fatigue? Or are there other pressures that have been hidden from the army? The debut was supposed to be a proud moment, but why did it end up with a gripping silence and a stalled camera? Jin fainted after the scene. Her acting debut was too real. Finally, Jin's first acting debut made him really tired. This is what happened to him. What will happen when someone who is known for his smile finally shed tears not because of the scenario, but because his body is no longer able to? What if acting, which has always been considered only a side project, actually brought a superstar to the most vulnerable point in his life? We're talking about Kim Seokjin, Jin BTS. Visually, the oldest young, the protector of warmth behind the glamorous glow of the stage, and now, an actor making his debut. But unfortunately, this is not the debut he imagined. This is not the moment the army dreamed of. Because instead of receiving praise after the last take, Jin had to be supported by two crews, rushed to the dugout while his body was barely conscious. Passed out. Silence. The camera stops. And everyone fell silent. What exactly happened? This question kept spinning in the minds of those who witnessed Jin's final scene before his body weakened. A crew member whispered something that has not yet been officially confirmed, that Jin not only played the character in the script, but allowed himself to dissolve completely, merge emotionally, until the line between acting and reality became too blurred. Is this the result of prolonged stress? Or is it precisely, and this is most astonishing, that Jin secretly carries unfinished emotional wounds from his time in the army? In the script of his short film, Jin played a young man who had to face the sudden death of his father. That key scene, the one where he is to open the morgue and stare into the father's face, was the trigger for everything. Some call it too late, too honest, too real. It was as if Jin had truly lost someone he loved, and in fact, not a few speculate that the script was actually written based on Jin's personal experience. Does this mean that the father figure in the story is a representation of someone he really cries for? Is Jin harboring wounds that he has never shared with anyone, not even with other BTS members? Yet there are small sneak hints of behind-the-scenes videos circulating limited in internal circles. A cut shows Jin standing alone in a corner of the studio, dressed in full costume but looking down silently for nearly 3 minutes. His left hand clasped the crumpled manuscript, and his eyes, unusually, did not radiate calmness, but a sharp emptiness. What was on his mind at the time? Some say that the scene is too personal. Jin had lost someone, but the public never knows. Even the army never realized it because Jin was too good at hiding wounds with laughter and loose change jokes. But this time, his own body refused to continue pretending. One of the staff said, "We thought he was just getting into character." But after the camera was turned off, he fell, not moving, all panic. The scene took more than 4 hours to shoot because Jin refused to use a stunt double. He wanted all those expressions to come from him, from his soul. But is this the price of the emotional frankness of an overly sincere novice actor? Most surprising was the statement from a senior crew member who did not want to be named. Jin said to me before filming started, "If I have to shed tears, let them be real tears. I want people to know what it's like to lose, not just watching the show." And after that, she really cried, but we don't know, it's Jin's tears or his character. Is this acting? Or the most honest recognition of the Jin as human beings? The army began to gather other clues. One of the fans zoomed in on the rehearsal video and realized that behind the camera, Jin was carrying a small photograph. No one knows who's in the picture. But when the emotional scene began, Jin glanced at the photo, closed his eyes for a moment, then began to cry without warning. Who exactly is in the photo? And why did the genie bring it? After the incident, filming was halted for 2 days. Jin reportedly experienced severe fatigue, but many did not believe it was just a physical problem. The fans who have been following Jin for a long time know he is not a person who is easy to fall physically. But emotionally, Perhaps this is the first time he has allowed himself to be fragile in front of the camera. There is another suspicion that the production side is pushing Jin too much to give maximum emotional performance because this project is a big collaboration with international parties. Debut pressure is no joke. It was even mentioned that there was an insistence from the agency to shake up the public through Jin's acting. If that is true, then we should ask, is Jin only pursuing ambition, or is it just a symbol of a great achievement that he had to pay for with his own health? Other questions began to arise. Did Jin really want this role? Or was there any other reason why he accepted this offer in the midst of a military schedule and recovery after a heavy assignment? Sources say that Jin initially refused, but eventually agreed after reading the script. What was in the script that made him change his mind? One of the viral fragments of the dialogue is the last sentence that Jin's character utters before blackout. "I lost everything, but no one really knows what it feels like." That sentence, ironically, also became the end of his consciousness that day, and until now, Jin has not appeared in public to give a direct statement. No fan cafe updates. There is no live, just quiet. The silence is so foreign from an idol who has been the most vocal to calm his fans that I ask the genie restoring the body or restoring the heart. This acting debut should be so early. But for many, this actually looks like a limit. The limits of Jin's ability as human beings in the spotlight of the world. The boundary between what he wants to give and what he can bear. And now, the biggest question hanging over everyone's minds, is Jin really ready to come back after this? Or we just witnessed the best performance, the most painful moment of a Kim seokjin. A few days after the incident, the sky over Seoul appeared darker than usual. Not because of bad weather, but because millions of hearts are overwhelmed with anxiety that has not yet found an answer. The HYBE building, which usually stands tall, is now more often overshadowed by speculation after speculation that has never been explained. There was no official statement from the management, only whispers between the crew and fans who began to find irregularities. Why did an idol of Jin's class faint on the set, and why did everything seem to be swept away in silence? The army, which never stands still when one of its members is injured, began their own investigation. One of the big fanbase accounts uploaded the results of the analysis of Jin's gestures during practice. In the video, which they watched in detail, Jin can be seen holding his chest several times, as if holding a long breath. But no one had noticed the gesture before. Because who would have thought that her calm smile hid such a huge pressure? Even Taehyung, his close friend who is known to be sensitive to the emotions of the closest people, looked stunned when he heard that Jin had fainted. In one of the audio recordings leaked to the public, a voice allegedly belonging to Taehyung is heard saying, "She said she was strong, but his eyes never lie." Then silence. Then the sound of bated breath. Like someone trying to hold back tears. Has Jin been pretending all this time just so as not to trouble the other members? We know Jin has always been a protector. The oldest. The most patient. The one who most often says, "I'm fine," even though the whole room knows she probably isn't. Then the question is now, since when is Jin not really okay? The emotional scene that knocked him unconscious turned out to be not the only heavy one. According to a co-actor, Jin was also asked to repeat the farewell scene 6 times because the director felt her expression was too real. A strange statement. Too real? Isn't that the purpose of acting? Or in fact, what the director sees is not an expression of acting, but an expression of genuine wounds. Some fans began to dig up old songs that Jin once wrote. In the song Abyss, he expressed his fatigue that he never showed to the public. Lyrics like, "I want to run away from the crowd that loves me," now feel more relevant than ever. Was this debut script the silent stage he chose to utter that fatigue once again, this time in a visual form? Another news that made everything feel even more confusing came from a stylist involved in the film project. He uploaded a short story, then deleted it a few minutes later. In the post, he wrote, as he was holding the costume, he said, "This is heavier than a military uniform." I thought he was joking, but now I understand. Does this mean that his acting pressure is actually more draining than his military service? And what tore many hearts out the most was the last text message Jin sent to BTS's chat group before the incident happened. The message was simple, but full of meaning. If later I get too into the role, please remind me who I really am. The sentence reads like a joke, until it finally came true. Jin is too into the role. And what he encounters is not just a character in the script, but a shadow of himself that he has been hiding. Is Jin trying to heal himself through acting, or is he unknowingly opening a wound that isn't ready to be seen again? HYB finally issued a short written statement, almost too short. A few days later, a recording from the rehearsal room that was never released to the public began circulating. Not from the official media, but from a former staffer who claimed to no longer be able to witness the silence that silenced the truth. In the nearly 2-minute video, Jin is seen rehearsing a farewell scene. But that's not what stopped the fans' hearts. It was the faint whisper in the background. He didn't sleep from yesterday. Why was he forced to shoot again? The voice sounded clear. The next day, Jin fell. Not because of the dialogue in the script, but because his own body gave up. Now the question is, who is forcing Jin to keep going? Who ignores those signs of fatigue? And even more terrible, did anyone deliberately put pressure on her in order for her debut to be perfect, without caring that her body and soul were already on the verge? One insider from the film world revealed to a reporter that Jin had asked for an extra week before filming. Not to rest alone, but to heal something from within. But the request was denied. Their reasoning is simple. The promotion schedule is already contractually bound. Contract. Is a week of rest too expensive compared to the health of a world star? Is the face of the Jin only seen as the face of profit, not the face of man? Jimin, who was overseas on personal business at the time, reportedly returned to Korea immediately after hearing about Jin's fainting. At the airport, he didn't say a word. Just keep your head down, put on a hoodie, and avoid any cameras. But his eyes were swollen. Even the photographer who used to chase him could not bear to press the shutter more than twice. What exactly is behind the relationship between Jin and the production crew of this film? Why didn't any of them dare to speak? Is it because of guilt, or because of greater pressure on them? Jungkook, who is usually active on social media, suddenly disappeared. No live, no updates. And on the third night since the incident, she posted a short story, just one sentence. Sorry, Hyung. There is no name. No explanation. But all the army knew to whom the sentence was addressed. Even more slicing is what happens a few hours after that upload. A handwritten letter was found behind the film set, allegedly belonging to Jin. The writing was barely legible, but some parts were solved by fans. If I fail to separate the role from myself, will I be lost? Should I keep going just for the sake of debut? Why does it feel quieter than I thought? The last sentence is like a knife. Not only does it pierce the hearts of fans, but it also opens up a deeper wound. Jin feels alone. In the bustle, the crowd, the glare of the cameras, he himself, and worse, fans began to suspect that this film, which was heralded as a grandiose project, would actually be a painful turning point in Jin's journey. Not because of the story, but because of what is not visible behind the production process. When the teaser of the film was finally released, the public was amazed at the quality of Jin's acting. Her expression was flat, but full of pressure. A low voice that pierces the chest. Small gestures, but full of meaning. Everyone praises. But no one realized that all was not acting. It's real. That's Jin, who are tired, which almost collapsed. People who want to rest but don't have time. Can it still be called acting? Or in fact, we've all witnessed real footage of someone trying to keep a smile on the edge of exhaustion. HYB still insists that Jin's condition is stable. But as of this writing, there are no recent photos or videos that prove that claim. There is only emptiness, speculation, worries. And shut up, and in that silence, rumors continue to grow. Some armies began to attribute this incident to Jin's return from military service some time ago. They feel Jin is not ready to return to the entertainment world at this fast pace. In his last interview before his film debut, Jin said, "I tried to rediscover who I am, but the world was running too fast." Now that sounds like a warning. Like a code we didn't catch. Did I ask Jin trying to tell us that he is not healed yet? And if so,